Hi friends, how are you? I'm Nicole and this is Crimes with Cole. So, hello. How are you guys doing today? I hope you all are having an amazing day. I hope you guys have had a wonderful weekend, a wonderful week this far, and are ready for another weekend. In today's case, we will be talking about Mark Winger and how he almost got away with the murder of his wife. And I truly believe that had his actions after the death of his wife were not as abrupt as they were, in my opinion, he may have truly gotten away with this. Donnah Winger was born as Donnah Brown on November 10th, 1963 to her parents, Sarah and Robert Brown. She was raised in a very tight-knit Jewish community and very much so, one day, wanted a family of her own. Family was important to her. Growing up, Donna's parents had divorced and, like most divorces, this was hard on her, especially because, family was so important to her. But that did not deter her from wanting one of her own one day. Donnah had grown up to be a overall well-rounded, loving, caring, outgoing young lady. She was said to be extremely supportive and just have a smile that would light up a room. As she entered into her adult years, everything seemed to line up nicely for Donnah. I mean, she had a great family to start with. She also had amazing friends that she would surround herself with and was doing well in her career. The only thing missing was her better half. Donnah was in her 20s at this point and was set up on a blind date with a man named Mark Winger by Mark's brother himself. And immediately, Donnah just was infatuated with Mark. He was handsome, successful, smart, funny, had an amazing sense of humor. I mean, he came from a really nice Jewish family, and they both held a lot of the same values, one of which was family. I mean, it was perfect. They were a match made in heaven. The two of them quickly fell in love, and the happiness that filled Donnah because she had gotten with Mark made everyone around her, all of her friends and family, just love him and adore him because of the simple fact that Donnah had never been happier in life at this point. And Mark loved Donnah. I mean, he wasn't scared to show it. He was always making her his first priority. He was very devoted to her and cherished her and just filled every love tank of hers. On March 4th, 1988, the two got married in Hollywood, Florida. They wasted no time trying to start a family. They both knew they wanted kids. They both valued family. So there really was no reason to wait in their eyes. Mark was offered a position in Springfield, Illinois, shortly after the two had wed as a nuclear engineer. And the two moved to the small town, which populated around 15,000 people. It was very small, but everyone was just nice. They were caring. They genuinely were good people in this town. They were so kind and sweet. I mean, it was absolutely the ideal place to raise a family. Once the two had moved, they moved into an upper middle class neighborhood and lived in a beautiful home. It was a very safe, tight-knit community that they had lived in. Everyone in the neighborhood seemed to be very caring and compassionate. Donnah actually got a job as an operating room technician at the local hospital, Memorial Medical Center in Springfield. Everything was just lining up great. The couple, they were happy with their new life. I mean, everything was just wonderful. Donnah had difficulties getting pregnant, though, and in fact was actually unable to get pregnant for years. And this, like most women who go through this, it was hard on her. I mean, when you want a family and you can't give that, It's hard and absolutely would make you feel like a failure. It's heartbreaking. And Donnah just, she wanted this big family so bad. She really wanted her own biological kids. But over time, after all the doctor's appointments and the struggles, she came to terms with the decision that maybe adoption wouldn't be so bad. I mean, it would still be fulfilling for her to have a baby, even if it wasn't her own biological child. She would still be a mother to someone. Now, as this thought was coming around Donnah's mind, and as she and Mark were thinking about it, things, kind of lined up and worked out for them, because Donnah was at a doctor's appointment one day, and her doctor had told her about a young girl who had gotten pregnant but wanted to give the baby up for adoption because she felt she, wasn't suited for a child at that time in her life. And sure enough, on May 27th, 1995, after 6 years of trying, Donnah became a mother to a beautiful baby girl, naming her Bailey Elizabeth Winger. And the day baby Bailey came home, you could just tell Donnah was always meant to be her mother. She just had this energy and was so delighted to finally have her baby and start her family. Mark enjoyed fatherhood too. I mean, he was always taking videos and pictures, and, they were both just very thrilled and happy. I mean, it was probably the happiest they had ever been in their entire lives. But eventually, the fun and excitement of a new baby came to an end as Donnah had to return to work. It was hard. Those 6 weeks go by very quickly. Even when you have 12 weeks off, it goes by very quick. And then you find yourself kind of looking at this precious baby, asking yourself, are they even old enough to really be with a babysitter yet? But Donnah had luckily met a woman by the name of Deanne, who she had worked with. Deanne and Donnah, they worked together at the hospital and became extremely close. Like, extremely close. Deanne was married to a man named John, and the two couples, they would hang out quite a bit, actually. Deanne actually referred to herself as Bailey's aunt. Like, that's how close that Deanne and Donnah had ended up getting over the years. And, this was nice because Bailey always had family around to watch her, which is just, it's a nice feeling to have when you have to go back to work and you have this young baby that you really don't want to leave. And it's hard trusting people to watch your kid because they're not going to love them the way you would love them. They're not going to coddle them the way you would coddle them if they get hurt. Not saying that they wouldn't, but it's different. So it was very nice and relieving for Donnah to have Deanne in her life. However, all of this would come crumbling down when Bailey was only 3 months old, and her mother, Donnah, was murdered. On August 29th, 1995, Donnah had been beaten to death with a hammer in her own home. During the 911 call, Mark was, barely able to get his words out. It was extremely hard for the dispatcher to even understand him. But he had told the dispatcher that a man had brutally attacked his wife and he shot him in self-defense. And he is now lying on the ground with a bullet in his head. During this call, both Donnah and her attacker were barely alive. Barely hanging on. He had hung up the phone from the dispatcher to go get Bailey, but the dispatcher calls him back to let him know, they were sending help. And during this time, the dispatcher is trying to get as much information as they can to help understand what has happened. And all Mark wants to do, and all he can keep saying is, I need to get to my wife. When police had arrived, based on what they had first seen, it was very obvious what happened. A man had broken or gotten into the house, attacked Donnah with a hammer as she was lying face down on the floor, and the back of her head was smashed in. And then the attacker was lying next to her face down with a bullet in his head, which, is what Mark had told the dispatcher. One of the detectives that had first arrived to the scene, a man named Charlie Cox, had said that he had a pretty good idea on what had happened. He had walked over to the attacker, pulled out his wallet to identify him, and discovered his name was Roger Lee Harrington. He was 27 years old. Ironically, though, Charlie knew Roger. Charlie, along with being a detective, was a landlord. He owned a trailer park, and inside that trailer park lived Roger. So he was aware of Roger's history of domestic disputes and wasn't really shocked that Roger tried to break into someone's home. He said that Roger was hot-headed and erratic at times. He could be aggressive and could possibly be capable of breaking into somebody's home to steal, but he didn't realize he was capable of attacking them with a hammer. And it was a very bloody, gruesome scene. I mean, there was blood everywhere. Like I said, she was attacked with a hammer, so you can only imagine what that's like to see. They pulled Mark aside and went into the bedroom, tried to just kind of get a better understanding of what had happened. Mark said he was downstairs on the treadmill when he heard a loud thud sound come from upstairs. He ran upstairs, and as he passed the bedroom, he saw baby Bailey, who's 3 months old, on the bed alone. And he knew Donnah would never leave that baby on a bed alone. He knew at that point something was wrong. He continued down the hall to the dining room where he saw Donnah being attacked. He said the man stopped, turned around, looked at him, and then turned back around and continued to attack Donnah with the hammer. He said that he had shot the man in the head, and it kind of blew him back a little bit, and he decided to go shoot the man again for a second time. The police did find a .45 caliber automatic handgun sitting on the dining room table, along with a pack of cigarettes and a yellow travel mug. Which, who brings a mug to a house when they're breaking into it? Why this gun was sitting out, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure where Mark even kept this gun or how he was able to retrieve it in such a timely manner while the attacker is continuing to attack his wife after making eye contact with him. I don't know about all that, but the travel mug did not belong to Donnah or Mark, but the hammer did. Mark said he had left the hammer out to remind himself or, to remind Donnah that they were supposed to hang up this hat rack, which, that kind of makes sense, but it's just very ironic, the timing of all of this. You leave a hammer out to remind you to hang something up, and your wife gets attacked with it. It would be an extremely convenient situation for Roger. Outside, they had found Roger's car, and inside his car, they found a piece of paper with Mark Winger written on it, along with their address and 4:30 p.m. So at this point, they're starting to wonder if Mark knows this man. Why would he have their address in his car if he didn't? Detective Cox had come up to Mark, who is still very much so upset and in shock. He is trying his hardest to calm down at this point. And he asked Mark if he knew this man. And that's when Mark replied, "Is his name Roger?" Detective Cox says, yes, his name is Roger. And Mark then tells Detective Cox how this was the man that had been harassing them all week. A week before this tragic attack, Donnah had taken baby Bailey down to Florida to visit with her mom and stepfather. They had such a wonderful time, and like all the other times, Donna's parents hated to see her leave, and even more so now that, baby Bailey's here and it's their grandbaby. I mean, that's got to be hard to say goodbye to your daughter, but I mean, it's probably even a little harder to say goodbye to your grandbaby, right? And Donnah had expressed to her mother, she was nervous flying with Bailey. I mean, Bailey is only 3 months at this point. I think any of us who have had children know it's a lot to go to the grocery store with a new baby. So I can only imagine flying with one. So Donna's mother, Sarah, wanted to make things easier on her when she arrived back home. She had set up for someone to come, pick them up from the airport and take them directly home, kind of like an Uber or taxi, but, back in the day. Just someone there waiting on you, and then, you hop in and go. I mean, why Mark was not there to pick up his wife and daughter, I'm not sure. Maybe he had to work. To me, that's strange because my husband would never allow me to come home from being out of town and he wasn't there to get me. Especially if we just got our baby girl we had been dying to have for years. But, nonetheless, Sarah had arranged for this for Donnah and Bailey. The shuttle service was called Bart's Transportation, and their driver was Roger. The drive from the airport to Donna's house was 2 hours, and during that drive, Donnah said she had such a strange experience. She said he just made her uncomfortable. I mean, it was weird being in the van with him. He seemed so angry for whatever reason. He kept speeding and jerking and braking instantly, and it just was not an enjoyable ride. And then you add she has her baby with her. She was stressed out. It was extremely stressful for her. Roger then started telling Donnah how he has voices in his head that he hears. He said they're spirits that tell him to do bad things like kill people and set car bombs. Then he would start telling her about all these wild sex parties he's been to or have had, and invited her to go to one of them. I mean, it was just weird. It was weird. It was awkward. It was just, I mean, oh God, could you imagine how uncomfortable anyone would feel in that situation? So when they arrived home, I mean, Donnah was relieved. She and Bailey made it home safe, but still worried that Roger was going to come back to the house. So, she had called her sister Michelle, and her sister told her, look, you're home now. Relax. You just had some crazy driver. You're safe now. Just try to relax and get some rest. Everything will be fine. Donnah had told Mark what happened, and he was upset. I mean, he wanted to file a report, so he had Donnah write down all of the details of this drive with Roger so that they had all that they needed to file a report. A day or two later, they started receiving phone calls to the house from a man who would ask for Donnah but never say their name, and they were convinced it was Roger because of his strange behavior during that car ride home. They had called Bart's Transportation because both Mark and Donnah were starting to get concerned at this point and felt Roger was stalking them. I mean, driving by their house and the unknown phone calls, and Bart's Transportation took it serious. They suspended Roger immediately. Once Detective Cox heard all of this, it made sense to him. Roger had some weird obsession with Donnah since he had driven her home that day and became fixated on her, and that would explain why he had their address in the car. On the fridge, as they entered, the home on the day of the attack, they had found a handwritten note from Donnah detailing all of this. So Mark wasn't making any of that up about the car ride home. As Donnah and Roger were transported to the hospital, Roger ended up passing away on the way there, and Donnah actually made it there. And the doctors worked on her for an hour before they decided to pronounce her dead. She was 31 years old and had just become a mother. Her family was absolutely devastated when they found out. Donnah was such a wonderful, kind, loving woman. They couldn't imagine anyone that would want her dead. And everything was just going great for Donnah and her life. I mean, it seemed to finally be complete, and now it was all ripped away from her. Then you add in how, she was murdered and how she was attacked and hit at least 6 times in the head with a hammer. I mean, it was just, it was a lot for everybody to take in. It was a very difficult process. And thoroughly looking at all of the evidence, they decided that Mark did shoot Roger in self-defense and was trying to be a hero to his wife. He was trying to save her. The case was closed within 48 hours and no charges were brought against Mark. Losing Donnah was extremely hard on everyone. Like I had said, I mean, they were all devastated, especially Mark. I mean, he loses his wife in such a brutal attack, and now he has this 3-month-old daughter to raise. He had called the rabbi to come over and help him mourn his loss, and Donnah's family actually came too to mourn in the traditional Jewish way, which is everybody gathered together the day after the death of a loved one. Mark said he just couldn't believe this happened, that he actually had Donnah bring Bailey to the office that day so everyone could see her, just bragging and showing off his new little family. And he just looked so genuinely happy. I mean, they both looked so genuinely happy. 2 hours later, he's watching his wife die in a gruesome way. And then on top of it, he had to shoot the man who's attacking her, which, I mean, could be rather shocking when you are not an habitual gun user and have ever shot anything before. It was just a lot. It was a lot for someone to go through and process, and his family just couldn't believe that he was even able to hold Bailey and function after going through that kind of trauma. Donnah's family knew that, he was going to need help with Bailey for, the first few months. So they actually all took turns flying to Springfield and staying up there to help out as much as they could. Getting over the loss of your wife is, not something that you just get over in a week or two. It takes a while, and they wanted to be there to help him any way that they could. They said he really seemed depressed and wasn't acting like himself. He started to drink a lot, going out to the bars, which was not like Mark at all. But they just brushed it off and figured it was his way of coping. It was a way for him to deal with the pain of losing Donnah. But what they did notice that he was doing that seemed kind of strange was that he seemed to be watching a lot of violent movies. One movie in particular is called Pulp Fiction, which is a pretty violent movie, especially for someone who just got done going through what Mark had gone through. But, they found this to be odd because why would someone who had just shot a man in self-defense and watched his wife get attacked want to be reminded at all of that? Like, why would you want to watch a violent movie that has to deal with shooting people and people dying and gruesome scenes? Sometimes watching movies can trigger those feelings and emotions of that day again, and they just couldn't understand why you'd want to relive that. Mark was not a violent person, but they just figured, to each its own, and continued to love Mark and support him, especially Sarah, Donnah's mom. Sarah could not imagine what he was going through, and she also wanted to always be in Bailey's life. She loved being a grandma, and just because Donnah was gone didn't mean she wanted to be. In December of 1995, when Bailey was 7 months old, Sarah had explained to Mark how, they all wanted to be there for him and Bailey, but it was probably going to be best if he hired some permanent help. They weren't going to be able to fly to Springfield every month for the rest of their lives. I mean, they loved him and were always going to be there for him, but it would be best if he hired someone because being a single parent is hard. It can be extremely hard on you. Mark ended up hiring a live-in nanny named Rebecca Schultz, and Rebecca was a young, beautiful girl. She was so good with Bailey, just adored her, and Rebecca just had this loving, nurturing personality and felt she could really help Mark out. She honestly felt bad for Mark, losing his wife with a new baby, and now he has to raise his baby alone and, grieve at the same time. So Sarah had stayed in town for a little while longer while Rebecca was getting, the hang of things. Sarah couldn't help but love Rebecca. She felt like Rebecca was a great fit. She saw the love that she had for this little girl. Rebecca and Bailey bonded instantly. And Rebecca would even come out and say how she adored Bailey and that in some ways, Bailey gave her the chance to experience motherhood. In interviews, Rebecca talks about how she felt bad for Bailey because Bailey had lost, 2 moms by the age of 3 months, and she really just wanted to give her the best childhood any child could have. Sarah felt Rebecca was great, and so did Mark. The man who killed Donnah was gone himself. It was a closed case. That should have been the end of all of it. Life should have just carried on, and it was for Mark. A few months later, Mark had called Jane and told her how Rebecca was pregnant, and Bailey was going to be a big sister soon. Rebecca was not only taking care of Bailey, but she was also taking care of Mark. After the dust had settled, they actually started a romantic relationship with each other. Mark said that he and Rebecca just really grew close. They'd stay up and talk after Bailey went to bed, have a drink or two, and Mark honestly felt like Rebecca was sent to him from Donnah, that she was an angel in disguise here to help him with his family, his baby, and, save his family ultimately. Mark said that Rebecca really helped him grieve the loss of his wife, which, I would think so too, because she ended up pregnant, and basically that Rebecca was the missing piece of the puzzle for them. And Rebecca felt the exact same way. She said she felt this natural mother connection with Bailey and that the 3 of them were already a family. And now she is pregnant, so, what better way to really come full circle and have a complete family? Donnah's family was shocked to hear this. I think they were shocked because of the timeline, how quickly it all happened, not necessarily because they never wanted Mark to move on, because they really did like Rebecca. They honestly felt she was good for Bailey and to have her in her life. And for Mark, too, and, the sense of helping him with Bailey. But the one person who really didn't like Rebecca was Donnah's best friend, Deanne, the one who referred to herself as Bailey's aunt. She just thought it was weird. It was the weird timing of it all, how this woman just comes in as this nanny and then she is all of a sudden in between the sheets with Mark and having his baby. She was very suspicious of Rebecca, and Rebecca noticed this. She noticed any time she became closer to Mark that Deanne always seemed to want to be there, getting closer to the both of them and Bailey. Deanne did try to stay close to Bailey, though. All of Donnah's family did. Like I said before, just because Donnah was gone didn't mean their relationship with Bailey was. But Rebecca felt Deanne was overstepping when it came to Bailey. Almost like Deanne wanted to be Bailey's mom. She also felt she was jealous of her and intimidated by her. During this time, Mark had applied for financial aid under the Crime Victim Compensation Act and received the maximum amount of $25,000. He also received life insurance of $150,000 and was in the process of filing a civil suit against BART Transportation because it was very clear Roger was unstable and shouldn't have been driving. He felt his family was put at risk. The community continued to help him even though he seemed to be getting his life back in assortment. He even landed a big promotion at work, which who's to say like the real reason why? But, he ended up getting a big promotion. 5 months after Donna's death, Mark had called Detective Cox and asked him if he was able to get his gun back, which, kind of took Detective Cox by surprise. Why do you need your gun back? It wasn't something that would be on someone's mind necessarily, like that quickly. I'm not saying people don't ever want their guns back, but 5 months after your wife had been murdered and you shot the attacker. I mean, I don't know. I think you would still be grieving at that point, not thinking too much about, like getting the gun back. But, Detective Cox told him, yeah, you can have it. Just come on down to the station. I just need to talk to you for a few, and I'd be more than happy to give it back. So once Mark had gotten down to the police station, he started talking to Detective Cox and asked him if they were still investigating him, if there was any reason for them to suspect Mark had anything to do with it, or was it completely closed? Like, you filed it away and have never thought of it again, which is a red flag right there. But he kept going in and trying to find out more and more about his case, although they already said it was closed. They already said it was ruled self-defense. No charges were being brought against him. And all of this just gave Detective Cox a really strange feeling. As Mark's family was growing their bond, as Mark and Rebecca were getting closer, and family life was just turning into exactly what they wanted it to, one person in Rebecca's life felt like something wasn't right. They felt uncomfortable with the thought of Rebecca and Mark starting a family and just how fast it all came about. And that person was Rebecca's brother. He said his first interaction with Mark was telling him nonchalantly how Donnah died, which you'd think someone who just lost their wife not even a year ago in a brutal attack would be a bit more emotional about it. I mean, he even went into details of that day and just had no emotions about it. It was weird. And he just seemed really fixated on how he was the hero and shot the bad guy, compared to just how traumatizing that day was. It was strange. It was very strange. Mark eventually suggested that he and Rebecca get married because they had a baby on the way, but Rebecca, she was a little hesitant. She was rather religious herself, and Mark was of a different religion. So she was just a little hesitant on how the two were going to become one in that aspect. However, Mark decided to start going to church with her and actually converted over to Christianity. So, they would raise their children as Christians, which can be a huge deal for some people, but Rebecca felt like this was a big commitment on Mark's behalf. And even though he was making this change for her, she was still hesitant because she felt like Donnah hadn't been gone that long, that they were almost rushing all of this. But Mark reassured her that Donnah sent him Rebecca as a saving grace and as an angel. Donnah would want Mark to be happy and to move on from the loss of her. So eventually, Rebecca married Mark. Now, when his family and rabbi found out about him converting to Christianity, they were completely shocked because Mark had always been very devoted to his faith. His rabbi had asked him, why are you converting? And Mark told him that Judaism is too difficult and too unforgiving, which was just kind of strange. 14 months after Donnah's death, Mark and Rebecca had wed. In October of 1996, Mark and Rebecca had eloped to Maui. They had a little private ceremony and they didn't even tell their families. They did, however, have a party the following month for everyone back home to, get together and celebrate. And like most of us would think, there was absolutely tension in the air at this gathering. Rebecca was a good girl. She was great with Bailey, but the timing of all of this, I mean, Donnah had been gone for 14 months and Mark is already getting remarried. He has already impregnated this woman within the first 5 months of her working for him. It was just fast. Like, it was extremely fast in all of their families' eyes. And Donna's families, and Rebecca's family, and even Mark's family. Like, they all thought it was just very fast. That December, Mark decided to sell the home that he and Donnah had bought and buy a farmhouse out in the country on 4.4 acres. They renovated it into their dream home, and life seemed to be wonderful for Mark and Rebecca. They ended up having 3 more kids, and Rebecca was able to be a stay-at-home mom and, stay with the kids while Mark had worked and supported them. And it was just, it was nice. It was a great, happy life for the two of them and their family. They seemed to honestly have everything that they wanted. And as life carried on for Mark and Rebecca, Mark started to distance himself from Donnah's family, which was really hard on them. I mean, Sarah, Donnah's mom, tried her hardest to keep in touch and come visit when she could because she really wanted to make sure that she stayed in Bailey's life. But, it was confusing for them all to understand the family dynamic. I mean, you have to imagine you're being told this is your sister, this is your grandma, this is your grandpa, and then some lady comes and says, oh, I'm only Bailey's grandma because her mother had died when she was a baby. And I think it just, I don't know. I'm sure all of them had their own feelings about it, but Sarah was always kind and loving towards the other kids when she did come visit. She was never nasty. She included them, but, she wanted to make it very clear that, she was Bailey's grandma. But like I said, Sarah wanted so deeply to make sure that Bailey and she stayed connected. One time she had bought this charm necklace to give to Bailey, and this really upset Mark. I mean, when Sarah put it on Bailey, he told her, take it off. Just take it off. It's too upsetting for him to remember Donnah by, which offended Sarah. I think I would be offended. And that was just the start. He eventually started to distance himself even more from her and even wrote her a letter saying that he doesn't want Bailey calling her grandma anymore. And she wrote back practically begging him to reconsider and to please allow them to continue to be grandparents to Bailey. I don't know. I don't know what you would do in that situation if you can obtain like grandparents' rights or whatnot. I'm not sure, but I think Sarah probably should have taken her blinders off in the beginning when Rebecca wound up pregnant and kind of saw that was the calm before the storm. So Donna's family actually decided that it would be best to take a step back from Mark and his new family. They decided that it wasn't going to do Bailey any good to be constantly fighting with them. They would still send cards every year, but Bailey never got to know them. And I'm sure Mark never gave Bailey the cards. And, it was just heartbreaking because Donnah wouldn't have wanted that. But, what else were they supposed to really do? Because Mark was not the same man that they knew as their son-in-law. For years now, Donnah's case had been closed. Mark moved on, had his dream life, dream home, new wife, 4 kids, dream job. Life was great for Mark. It really was. But that detective that was on the case, Detective Cox, he just had this gut feeling. Another officer there that day said the same thing, that there was just something about this case they could not put their finger on. They said that Mark had no blood on him, and the chances of him having no blood on him with a crime scene like that would be so small. It just didn't make sense to them. And they also noticed that Mark said he had shot Roger in the front of the head first, but that was not true. Donnah's father was extremely skeptical about Mark's honesty with this attack because he said, just like Rebecca's brother did, that on the day of Donnah's funeral, Mark told Donnah's dad what had happened in details, and there was no emotion, which is just, I mean, you're lying your wife in the ground. If that itself doesn't put you in a whirlwind of emotions, and then you are telling her dad the details of her death on that same day, and you're as composed as can be. Like, it was just odd. And another thing that was odd was that Donnah was a very safe person, and her family knew this. So for her to just leave the front door open while she had been getting these random phone calls from some unknown man, she wouldn't have done that. Roger's family thought, that he was always innocent, that the media made him out to be some crazy lunatic that he isn't. They were able to confirm some of the things that Donnah had written in that letter, like how he heard the voices from the spirits. His sister confirmed that he had created like this scary spirit that would scare people on Halloween. And once the media caught wind of that, they just kind of blew it up and out of proportion. But there wasn't anything they could really do. I mean, the case had been closed for years, and they truly felt Roger was a victim in this situation. But the media and police had already made him out to be something he wasn't. In October of 1998 was the start of Mark's life forever changing. He was feeling sick and had gone to the emergency room, and Rebecca had gone with him. While they were there, they ran into Deanne, Donna's best friend from work, the one that would call herself Bailey's aunt. And words were exchanged, and Mark told Deanne, basically this would be the last time she ever sees him. A few months later, in February of 1999, Deanne had gone to the police, and she had told them she had a secret that she had been keeping about Donnah dying. And at this point, it had been 3.5 years. Police were shocked when she came in and just completely, they were just completely shocked. It turns out that Deanne had been having marital problems 3 months before Donnah had died, and Mark was being the mediator for Deanne and her husband. And Donnah said that she just thought that it was great. She thought it was a great thing that her husband was helping her best friend with her marital problems, but that wasn't the case. Deanne and Mark had actually been having an affair, so maybe he was helping her with her marital problems. I don't know. But now, when the family found this out, they were just completely shocked. I mean, Deanne continued to tell the police that Mark actually told her. He had told her that everything could be so much easier for them, referring to Mark and Deanne and their relationship, and they could be together if Donnah was just dead. And Mark even tried to convince Deanne to be a part of this by asking her if she would just find Donnah dead and report it to the police. That's all she had to do. That Mark would be out of town and Deanne would find Donnah dead. And Deanne thought Mark was crazy. She would never actually want to hurt Donnah and never thought Mark would either. She continued to tell the detectives how Mark had told her about, the crazy ride that Donnah had when she was coming home from the airport, and he decided that this would be the perfect time, the perfect guy to frame to get rid of Donnah. He told Deanne all of this. On the day of Donnah's murder, Mark had called Deanne and asked, would you love me no matter what? Deanne replies, yes. That was Mark's sign to go forth with this plan. He even pulled Deanne aside on the night of the service when all the family had gathered and told her that he thinks the police believe him. And he did this for them, that she can't tell anyone. Otherwise, their gooses would be cooked. And then, months later, Rebecca comes into the picture, and he literally chooses Rebecca over Deanne, who he claims he did this for. And it took her 3.5 years for her to go to the police. And to top it all off, Deanne said that she and Mark had exchanged rings during like all of the chaos of Donna's death and Rebecca coming into their lives as, the nanny. And that's why she didn't like Rebecca and was so against it. Because here this woman is having an affair with a man. He murders his wife for them to be together, gives her a ring as a sign of a commitment, and then hires a nanny and ends up in bed with the nanny, then starting a whole new life with her. I think that would piss anyone off. Even if there was no murder, just to be led on like that and then dumped like you were nothing. Like, oh. Once it was clear that Mark chose Rebecca, Deanne fell into a deep depression. She actually tried to take her own life multiple times and felt this overwhelming amount of guilt and shame because of what Mark had done. But something about seeing him and Rebecca in the emergency room that day really just set her off, and she decided to go to the police. And of course, they were shocked, but the ones who always had a suspicious feeling weren't and were eager to open this case back up. After they opened the case back up, they went through phone records to confirm that, there was indeed an affair going on. They noticed that the door had no signs of forced entry, yet Mark said that the attacker had broken in. And they also went back and looked at all of the evidence, and in particular, the photo of the yellow travel mug and pack of cigarettes that belonged to Roger that were sitting on the table, which is just odd to have. Why did Roger bring those items into a house where he was supposedly planning to kill this woman? Who does that? Also in his car was no indications of any weapons that he was going to use. So yeah, the hammer was laying out because of hanging up the coat rack or, whatever, but what if the hammer had never been laying out? Like, then what? I mean, when you take a step back and you look at it, it honestly looks like Roger was not prepared for this murder he had allegedly planned out. Mark also said in his 911 call that he had shot him once, but there were 2 bullets in Roger's head. Mark had hung up the phone, and they think that may be when Mark went to put the second bullet in him. And the neighbors actually can verify that they did hear 2 gunshots that were like 5 minutes apart. So the detectives decided to go to the evidence room and get all of the files, but they were all gone. They had been given to Mark's attorney when he was fighting that lawsuit against Bart's Transportation. Detective Cox decides to go over to the attorney's office to grab the files. When he was there, they asked if he wanted these 3 Polaroid photos that they had. And these 3 Polaroid photos were of the crime scene that had been completely just overlooked during the initial investigation. Detective Cox had never seen these, and when he looked at them, I mean, that was it. These photos, these Polaroids are what contradicted Mark's story. The way Roger's body was lying in the photo was the opposite of what Mark had originally told them. Now, Bart's Transportation had hired their own blood analysis expert due to, the lawsuit, and they said that the blood splatters did not match Mark's story either. Roger's roommate, Susan Collins, had also told the police that there was a man that called Roger and asked him to meet him the day before Donna's murder. However, at that time, this was useless information to them, so they just blew it off. Looking back, that is why Roger had that piece of paper in his car with Mark's name and address and 430 on it. And Roger was excited to meet up with Mark. He was hoping maybe he could talk things over with Mark, explain why he was acting the way he was that day that he had drove Donna and, the baby home, and hopefully even get his job back at Bart's Transportation. So the media actually ended up bringing this all to the surface when they found out, and everyone was just shocked. Roger's family knew the entire time that he had never done this, and in a way they felt like he deserved to have his name cleared. Donna's family was so shocked that Mark would have done this to Donna, to the one woman who he loved and adored. the woman who he always made a priority. And he would viciously attack her with a hammer. Like, of all things and ways to kill her. I mean, and Rebecca was just, I mean, she couldn't believe it. She could not believe that Mark was this evil, period. Because never once did he ever show any signs of aggression. Never. Throughout their entire relationship, he was never mean or nasty to her or their children. So, needless to say, her world was changed overnight. On the morning of August 24th, Mark had gone to work, and during this time, his house was being watched by police. And on this particular morning, Mark turned the wrong way. And Mark knew what he was doing. He wanted the officers that were watching him to follow him. So he did this on purpose. And then when the officer had pulled up next to him, Mark rolled down his window and threatened the officer, telling him to leave him and his family alone. The officer obviously reported this, and then they decided that day was the day that he would be arrested. So they went to his place of employment and arrested him at 11 o'clock. When Rebecca found out, I mean, she was just a mess. Bailey was 6 at this point. Their youngest was 1. Rebecca is a stay-at-home mom with these 4 kids. Mark is the provider, and she just felt like she was getting ready to lose her husband, and they were going to lose their dad. And I mean, it was an awful feeling, I'm sure, but so was what he had done to Donnah. And everyone, including Donna's family, just couldn't believe that Mark was a killer. They kept hoping he would be found innocent, that the police had just stick up their tail ends and wanted to blame him. Nearly 7 years after Donna's death in 2002, Mark's trial had begun. And Rebecca felt, she should stand by her husband during this entire thing. So she did. Roger's family absolutely wanted Mark in prison, and Donna's family was hoping that he would be found innocent because they just couldn't accept the thought that he would do that to Donnah. The defense argued that Roger had a mental illness and erratic behavior, just like in the car ride home. So they said that because of Donna's complaint, Roger lost his job, got mad, and wanted revenge. So he went over to the Wingers' house to talk to them. This is why he had the mug and cigarettes. But he got so enraged that he had grabbed the hammer lying out and attacked her with it. Which, it sounds reasonable, except then they brought out the Polaroid pictures showing the positions of the body and how that story just wasn't feasible. They said, we don't know if the paramedics had moved the bodies before those pictures were taken. The prosecution said that Mark wanted Donnah dead. He told Deanne, his lover, for months about this plan and just needed someone to put the blame on. When he heard about Roger and Donna's ride home, he thought, what better opportunity than to frame this man who has erratic behavior? They brought Deanne to the witness stand, but actually granted her immunity because, let's be honest, if she would have never said anything, I don't think this case would have ever been reopened. And the defense absolutely tried to make Deanne look like the crazy, jealous ex, which, I think we all saw that coming, but she was rather emotional over, the entire thing. I'm sure she got over Mark choosing Rebecca over her, but, to get over your lover killing his wife for you, just, I don't know. I feel like that carries a little bit more weight than him leaving you for another woman. So the jury came back and Mark was found guilty on all counts. Detective Cox had apologized time and time again about Roger and how they blamed him and just how he was truly a victim in the situation. And they just blew it off because of the first scenario they thought of, which I think says a lot about him because I don't feel a lot of times that detectives, police departments, when they're in the wrong, that they're quick to come out and apologize. They're just like, okay, and carry on. Mark was sentenced to life without parole. Rebecca had a hard time adjusting. But over the years, she came to terms with it and realized he was the guilty one. In 2006, Mark showed his true colors by writing a 19-page detailed description of how a hitman were to kill Deanne for him and were to kidnap a man who Mark was childhood friends with because they did not post his $1 million bond, and then kill him too. Mark felt Deanne was the reason his plan was ruined, which, she absolutely did play a huge part in the discovery of the truth, in my opinion. After discovering this, Mark was brought to trial and sentenced to another 35 years for that. He claimed it was all just fantasy and creative writing, but the other inmates said he talked way too much about it and not in the context that it was some book that he was working on that he wanted to publish. Rebecca raised her 4 kids just fine. It was an amazing mother to them. When Bailey was 24 years old, Rebecca actually thought it would be great for her to, have a relationship with Donna's family, which, she's 24 years old at that point, but, I guess better late than never. So they all went to Florida to visit and have this big family outing and just, get to know each other, which I'm sure was nice for Bailey. How she feels about it, I'm not sure. I think it could kind of go one way or another, but I bet for her grandparents, it was extremely heartwarming. I bet they probably just loved it. Hopefully something happens between that. Hopefully they carry on some sort of relationship and keep in contact, because that is just a devastating story. That is all I have for today. But before I go, I just have to ask, because I am just so curious. If you were Deanne, how long would it have taken you to come forward, if you came forward at all? I know some people would be able to suppress that feeling, and others, it would eat them alive. So I'm just curious, if Deanne had not seen them that day at the hospital, do you think she would have came forward? Or, just carried on with the burden like she had carried it? I don't know. You guys will have to let me know what you think. And until next time, please remember to be safe, and I will see you then. Bye.